Hello, learners. Hope you are keeping well. Today's section that we're going to look at is settlement geography, and we're looking at the urban structure and patterns, and we're focusing on the urban models or urban models of urban structure. So let me get this little piece away, and then we can get started. All right. So let's look at it again, learners. What are we doing is we're doing urban structure and patterns. And please note, this section is quite long, so we split it into two. Today, we're going to focus on the models of urban structure. Okay? And this was done in another lesson. If you followed my lessons, you would have seen one on that. But today we're focusing on the models. Both fall under urban structure and patterns. So let's get on. So when we look at the models itself, we're going to look at the models of urban structure, and our focus is going to be, as the exam guideline indicates, let me get my highlighter. We're going to look at Burgess, concentric, Hoyt sector model, Harrison Allman's multiple nuclei model. We're going to look at a modern American Western city, a third world city, a South African city, and we're generally going to look at the changing urban patterns and land use in South Africa. That's our focus for our lesson. So let's get going. Right. Once again, we have to just go through these pointers here uh, in order of a form of revision. Urban structure is actually again the arrangement of land use in urban areas. All right, that is how the land use in a city or urban area is set out. Along similar lines, the pattern is how different functions and elements of a settlement form, how they are distributed close to each other or far away from each other, and how they are mixed spatially. All right. And once again, to look at this, I've done this in past lessons. Urban settlements are generally nucleated. All right. So that's our little baseline. Let's start. The first model, Burgess's concentric zone model. All right. Now, what was the whole idea of Burgess's model of urban areas? He said that the urban area, and let me get back to that, the urban area actually forms in concentric circles. Can you see the concentric circles in this diagram? In concentric circles. And he said that the CBD was in the center, followed by, and if you follow the key here, by factories, okay, in this area, all right, industries, and also he indicated that this was a zone of transition, a zone of change, because the CBD will come into it. A valid point. All right. Then he said it'll go according to income. Now, learners during his time, when this theory came, it was working class and middle class and whatever. Of course, we don't use that terminology anymore. We say low income or working income, middle income, higher income. All right. So please excuse this for now because this is how his model was. And he mentioned that the next group was the working class, as he indicated. And then as you go a little bit away, it was the middle class, or as we say now, the middle income. And on the outskirts were the commuters, the richer, the higher income people. They were on the outside because they could travel to the CBD. So, in a nutshell, that was his theory. Concentric zones with the CBD in the center, and as we move out, we get a transition and the residential areas from low to high. So, let's do a little thing on this. And what did he say? He said, Burgess, land use zones develop in concentric circles around the CBD. And as I pointed out to you, CBD is in the center. Transition zone is around the CBD, which consists of your factories and things like that. All right. So the factories is in this zone, which is around the CBD. Then distance from factories are the next one, with the lowest income closest and the highest income furthest away, obviously with the middle income in the middle. Let's look at some criticisms. All right. Okay. So the first thing he was criticized on, CBD is in the most accessible part, not always in the center. We must remember that. It's more centralized generally, but it will be in the most accessible part. So if I go back to this diagram, and if I create transport routes all leading to that point, then the chances are in my city, the CBD will be in that accessible point, not always in the center. Okay? Next criticism was that all industrial and commercial activities is not in a specific area. All right? It can be in many places. If we look at this, again, coming to the diagram, all right? And for instance, mentioned clearly, central business district here, the factories are here. All right? But we know businesses can be in the income areas, the residential areas. Okay, even industries, light industries like bakeries, tailors, all can be around there. So he did not consider this. All right, so that was a criticism against him. Also, he did not consider transport routes and its effect on the spread of activities, example, the commercial. All right. That was another criticism that happened, that along transport routes, activities will take place. We see it. All right. When we look at development, when the transport routes come out, there are activities along that. And he did not consider the transport routes that there could be commercial activities around that area. Okay, so he brought in some important things like the transition zone, etc. But he was also criticized. Then came another person, Hoyt, who brought in the sector model. Now, his idea was he did consider transport routes, all right? And he said, no, 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 no. The city does not develop in concentric zones, but develops in sectors. You understand? Like that, going up there and going up there and going up there. So it forms in sectors. That's what he mentioned. He still mentioned that the CBD was in the center, but from there we would find sectors developing. There was some emphasis on the high income area. Okay, if you look at this, the high income area is here. And of course, it will be in the most scenic and obviously maybe in the best position in terms of pollution, followed by the middle income or class, yeah, it's known as, all right? And then, of course, the low income. Of course, the word class was used again. In their time, that's how it was. Now we use the word income. All right, that makes a lot of sense that the low income will be closest to the place of work, all right, which is the industries, all right, and then of course the high income can afford to be furthest away. So he spoke about sectors in the form of wedges that seem to form. Okay, so let's look at his model now. Number one, land use zones develop around the CBD, which is in the center. He tended to agree with the central place or concentric zone model, rather. All right. The emphasis on high income area, they furthest away from the industries with the low income closest. So distance from factories with low income closest and high income furthest away. Okay. Again, he said the CBD is in the center and did consider that development can occur along the transport routes. Okay. He also considered one more thing here, that if you look at this area, he said that they undergo change, that these people move away from here and go to the outskirts, because this could be a zone of transition where the CBD takes over. Okay, now let's look at criticisms. All right, the CBD is in the most accessible area, not always in the center, same as Burgess's concentric zone model. All right. Another thing they mentioned, all industrial and commercial activities are not in a specific area. Now, let's get back to looking at this. All right. With this one, yes, he spoke about development along transport routes, if you can see that. It's occurring there. All right, let me get my pointer. Can you see it? It's occurring along transport routes. But again, another criticism of his was he then mentioned, if you look at the red, all industrial activities occur here and all commercial activities occur there. And once again, like in the first model, we know that commercial activities and light industries can happen in the residential areas. So those were his criticisms. One improvement was he did consider the transport routes. Right, let's get to the next one. And this one is known as Harrison Allman, who produced the multiple nuclei model. They changed the concept now. They said, whoa, yes, the CBD is important. All right, the CBD is important and we need it. There it is there. It's generally the most accessible point. All right, but everything does not revolve around the CBD. There are various other nuclei that will determine land use. So if we look at this, this could be accessibility. This is found on the outskirts and industry, maybe where the bulk transport is. So the bulk transport will determine that area. If we go to the suburbs, it'll be on the outskirts, more scenic view. All right. So he created various things. The lower income, all right, they'll be nearer to the commercial area or place of work. All right. If you look at it here, all right, the higher income further away. Can you see even E is around this side? Can you see it? So he said lots of things will determine, different nuclei will determine the location of certain land use zones. Accessibility for the CBD, bulk transport for the high industry, aesthetic appeal for the high income area. Those were the different nuclei. So, in other words, the other two models had set little models how the city looks. Harrison Allman said, this is an example of a multiple nuclei model. Let's say, for instance, in a place which is a recreation town and there's no industries, then there won't be industries found. All right. So the example of a model will change for each city depending what the need is, what the nuclei is, and what the land use zones is. So there wasn't a set model for this. This looks very, very realistic. As we know, various factors determine the location of various land use zones, or various nuclei determine the location of various land use zones. So let's look at them. They said land use zones develop around different nuclei depending on the needs of the land use. You see it here? Heavy industry, nuclei could be bulk transport, there could be others. CBD, most accessible area. High income area, nuclei would be aesthetic appeal. Low income area, near place of employment would be the nuclei. All right. So there was no set structure regarding this model. It will change from one urban area to the next. Basically, there was no real criticisms for this model because it could be adapted to different cities with different nuclei. Okay, that was that model. Let's go on. Let's look at the modern American Western city. And basically, we have to give a brief description of this. All right. We noticed that the movements that occurred initially was the movement of people into urban areas. So we had this rural urban migration. But as the city developed, okay, the important point to note about modern American cities, because in settlement geography you covered about cities, postmodern cities, etc. The important more point to note here, all right, is that movement now is people out of the urban areas. All right, so we're having urban rural migration, moving from urban areas to rural areas because the city is becoming congested, or we're getting these little satellite towns developing on the outside. Okay, that's the main thing you need to know. Learners, you'll notice that I'm getting a bit American also with American cities, and I'm putting in a Z instead of an S. So we had commercial decentralization, which was a huge thing. Commercial functions moving out and people moving with them, or people not coming in anymore. You understand? Because the functions are out. We'll find this is a sort of pattern that many cities are taking across the world. In fact, in South African cities, we're getting a similar sort of pattern that is happening where people now don't go into the CBD anymore. Just that we're looking at the city in South Africa. Of course, the rural areas still need to develop, and we may find the same pattern occurring when people move back to the rural areas. Okay, when they are established and they have the various facilities, etc. The section you did under rural settlements. Now, don't forget, we can test questions across that. We can test questions across urban to rural. Okay, right. Let's go on. The third world city. We always talk about two worlds in one city. Look at the developed here and look at the shacks here. All right, next to one another. Okay, and this is a real third world city. Big cities, all right, with not much in between. Okay, but big cities in these third world countries. So we have large scale rural urban migration. It's still in that process. Of course, due to various factors, due to opportunities. All right, you know all the opportunities you did in rural area, better jobs, better education, pull factors that draw them to the urban areas. Of course, there's a natural increase, not much of the due to people are not that people are not intelligent, they are, but education etc doesn't allow, lack of education doesn't allow people to be educated and think and work and employ themselves. So we find the natural increase is high, and we find formal and large scale informal settlements. You can see it here, large formal and then informal settlements, okay, all in one. This is a picture, a general picture of an urban or third world city. All right, let's get into the South African cities. Now, obviously, we have to look at one big influence in terms of the apartheid city. And it's clear what you see here. If you look at this key, you'll find certain terminology here that, in terms of people being grouped and the words used, it was used during the apartheid era, so they may not be appropriate now, but it's important for me to show you like this. And what do you notice? The big emphasis was on race. As they said, they're white. Okay, you look at colored, you look at Indian, and in that stage, people, black South Africans were known as African group area. All right. So we notice this is how it was distributed along the way. And if you look at this, industrial. So it wasn't just based on income anymore, it was based on race. Notice where the black South Africans were near the industrial areas, Indian South Africans, colored South Africans, you understand, all were closer. And the general, of course, this was the lower white income, but the majority of the people were away, all right, from that. All right, you will notice. Now, also, you'll see that there were different sort of buffer zones to protect the white communities, so called, from the black communities. So it was all based on race and, of course, the protection more of the white population groups. That was the apartheid. So it was influenced by the apartheid policy and the Group Areas Act, where people were separated according to different races. But yes, we're undergoing transition due to democracy. Now it just can't be a color issue anymore. People of South Africa are people of South Africa, green, brown, black, yellow, orange, whatever. People are part of South Africa now, and we need to look at it as a combined. And just a general, it may not be totally applicable, but we look at the post apartheid. Now, what do you notice? All right, you notice high density, informal, low density. It's based on that. And of course, the densities will be based on the income of the area. Like, for instance, informal settlements due to rural urban migration, a common situation that exists now. All right. And we look at, for instance, here, H, high density. Can you see it? High density, which will generally be your lower income near your industrial areas. Okay. It's near your industrial areas. Can you see that? All right. And if you look at the gated suburbs, something new. Gated suburbs, you find that these suburbs, sometimes you drive in the higher income areas, they've got those boom gates, etc., that protect the people. They can afford to have all these different things to close, to have road closures, etc. These things seem to be coming up now, all right, on a much greater scale. So density also will be based on the income, etc. So now we notice, and generally it was from a racial situation, okay, although we still get dominant races in certain areas like our townships of Lenasia and Soweto and El Dorado Park. You may find this still a certain racial dominance, but it's changing. But as people are moving into other areas, you find it's based on income. And other challenges come out now with informal settlements, etc. We also find another thing in terms of malls and shopping centers that are popping up. So the change from race to income. Okay, that's your post apartheid cities in general. Right. Changing urban patterns. Let's look at this section, and land use and the South African city. So, what do we find now? One of the issues we find is urban renewal, like this. Before, slum area, dilapidated buildings. After, we're finding these things starting to happen. All right. This means renovating of the urban area. Now, we have various things. All right. This is facadism. Here, what happens is certain buildings have a lovely historical uh, outside. You understand? They have lovely architecture. All right. So, what happens? You keep the external front, but you modify the rest of the building. So, you look at this lovely historic front, which was built years ago. And when you go in, you find it's all modern, lovely air conditioning, whatever. Then gentrification, all right, is upgrading the rundown areas of the inner city, upgrading them to make them look like this. All right. And another thing that is happening in the patterns is invasion and succession. That's, I hate to say it, but I have to say it is inappropriate land use replaced by more appropriate land use. Example, residential to commercial. In the center of a CBD, if you've got your house there, all right, you pay high rates and taxes. All right, it's too much. Whereas, so it's not really appropriate to have your little house in the center of the CBD, occupying land with garden around it, etc. What happens then? You can sell your land at a very good price, and suddenly commercial functions are built there. All right, which makes more sense. So it's invasion and succession, a more appropriate land use for the area like the CBD. We find also decentralization of functions are happening. Commercial functions are moving to residential areas. All right. You'll find now if you have to do certain things, you do not have to go to the CBD anymore. You go to your mall, you do your banking, you buy your clothing. I know many of you learners have got a lot of money. So it's all these top flight clothing shops and sports where you can do it in a mall. You don't have to go anywhere else. All right. So commercial functions are moving. Convenience of having different functions in one area. If you go to a mall, you'll find all the things, whether it's commercial, you will find your eating places, all right, your different types of shops, whether it's groceries, whether it's clothing, your high tech, all found in one area. This seems to be now the changing patterns, and it's very, very big. I know in areas like Pretoria, there are lots of malls that are found. People hardly visit the Central Park. Okay? So those are the changing patterns. Obviously, we'll have to come to an exam question. And I chose this one. It says model of urban structure. And very quickly, it's so easy to identify. We'll see different pieces, all right, or different land use zones allocated around here. Can you see it? And of course, it'll be around different nuclei. Can you see it? All right, different nuclei. So very, very quickly, we can see that this is Harris and Allman's multiple nuclei model. It gives us another two-dimensional here. All right, we can see that one is a central business district. Can you see one here? The examiner gives you a lot of information. The density of buildings, the height of buildings. Can you see those characteristics now can come in here? We don't just have to talk about the model, but we mix three or four sections. Can you see it? If you look at all these areas, you'll notice as you move to the outskirts, the industrial areas, all right, all these different things. So you know it's the multiple nuclei model based on accessibility, based on being on the outskirts because of pollution, bulk transport, etc. And the different zones are given here. Okay. Now, let's look at the questions itself. First question, identify the model of urban structure. We know it's the multiple nuclei model. That's the main part of the answer. Next question, which land use zone covers the largest area illustrated by this model? And it's clearly, in most cases, you'll find it's a residential area. All right, look at this because you have low, medium, high. And if you look at 3, 4, and 5. And there's another 3 here. You'll notice how much area it covers. So it's the residential area. You could have worked that out, learners. All right, residential. Let's go to the next question. Name one. Now, watch out here. Action word visible characteristic of the CBD. Many learners, again, selective reading, they forget this and they name anything. You have to look at the diagram. Very, very important, learners. Geography, again, I know I say this 100 times, it's not difficult. Look at the CBD, you know that's a CBD. You can look at the tall buildings, the height, and the density. It's close together. Those are two factors that is visible here. So, tall buildings and high building density, straight from there. If you know your work, you'll be able to apply it. All right. Let's look at the next one. I'm sorry, I'm skipping questions here. All right. Give one reason for the development of the outlying business district. All right. The OBD. You saw it on the sketch. It was on the outskirts. Can you see it? The outlying business district. That is 7. Can you see it here? And you know we spoke about commercial decentralization. All right. When we're moving stuff out. All right. So decentralization of commercial activities. All right. Okay. Uh, then we will find the outlying business district is more accessible to the outskirts. All right. These are simple answers that you give the same characteristics. Commercial activities are now closer to the residential areas. And if you went back to the model, they're bringing the business to the customers. Also, less traffic congestion on the outskirts. Instead of having your business in the CBD, if you have it in the outskirts, it becomes more accessible also. Less traffic congestion, less frustration, less time wasted. So it's better for you to be there. Okay, I know this can be debated, but lower crime rate on the outskirts, therefore they move there. More space and room for expansion on the outskirts, as seen on the diagram. You can expand horizontally also. You understand? Make yourself bigger. In the CBD, when you have it, you understand? You're limited in terms of your building, and it's expensive to expand, beside the space being limited. Land is cheaper, you save a lot of money, you can build more, right? Less pollution on the outskirts, right? Which creates cleaner environments, more aesthetic appeal, therefore attracting more customers. Peaceful and tranquil surroundings in the outskirts. Some well, it's related to the aesthetic appeal, but it's more peaceful, more calm, less noise, less trucks, less traffic. So it's more peaceful. All right. Another thing we're looking at the viewpoint of why it's better to move there. All right. We're looking at a pull factor. But what about the CBD? We can answer in that way also, and CBD becomes less accessible. Therefore, people move out. Commercial activities of the CBD are far from residential areas. Can you see how we can answer it in different ways? So it's far from there. Now we're looking at from the CBD now. More traffic congestion in the CBD. All right? Can you see the same things, but we're taking it from the viewpoint of the CBD? Higher crime rate. There we said lower crime rate. Less space. Can you see the opposites? It can be answered. More pollution, higher land values. Can you see it? And lots of urban blight in the CBD, dilapidated buildings. So this question can be answered in two ways. One, you're looking at why is the outlying area better? And the other one, why is the CBD not that good or conducive? Okay? Let's look at the next one. It says refer to land use 5 and 6. Let's quickly look at it. Let's go back to our sketch. 5 is your high income area, and 6 is your heavy manufacturing area. We already know. Can you see the distance between the two? Because they are not good to have nearby. These people can pay enough to live away. All right, they can afford it. They don't want to have the pollution near them. All right, so they will live away from the industrial areas, near the scenery, while that one will look for bulk transport. I do apologize again. I'm really skipping here now. All right, so let's go to the question. All right, comment on the location of land use 5 and 6 in relation to each other. We'll notice again the land use zones are far apart, or they're located on opposite sides of the city. Can you see it? All right, they move away, they're not suitable for one another. All right, now that's easy observation. Next question: compatibility. They are not compatible, we know. All right, because the rich people want to be near the aesthetic areas, the beautiful areas. They can afford to. Low income, they don't want to be near the industrial areas, but unfortunately, they don't have the money to live away. They want to be near the place of work. So, compatibility determines the location of land use zones in an urban area. Give reasons why 5 and 6 are not compatible. All right, compatibility will determine that. In this case, why are they not? One, heavy manufacturing industries, land use cause a lot of noise, pollution, which does not suit the high income residential area. Can you see? It's just logic. Therefore, it's away. You understand? Air pollution from industrial areas pushes high income area away. They don't want to be there. It's a push factor from that area. Unpleasant odors from industries not attractive to high income areas. Remember, it's not attractive to anyone, but the high income area can be away because they can afford to. It's not that the low income love pollution. Heavy industries not aesthetically pleasing. Remember, the high income area wants to be near aesthetic appeal. They got the money, they can move away. All right. Influx of traffic congestion near heavy manufacturing land use zones not suit the high income residential area. They don't want to see thousands of trucks moving by each time. As I say, it's about affordability also. They want to be away. Okay, so that's what makes them not be compatible or compatible. Okay, let's go to one more question. What are the similarities between the South African city and the model identified? And now remember, the model is the multiple nuclei model. And what about a South African city? And I showed you the South African city now. Remember, those years it was based on race. Now it's based on income. All right. And we're seeing it clearly. All right. Can you see how we're applying different things? All right. There's a separation between high, middle, and low income residential areas. There's a separation between suburbs and workplace, or the higher income areas and workplace. Rich people are now living outside in the rural urban fringe, etc. All right. And now we notice the sharply defined land use zones. That's industrial, all right? That's commercial, all right? Not that there's no commercial in the residential area, but our land use zones does have some clarity, all right? Heavy industrial areas will be there. There won't be large residential areas around heavy industrial areas. Your CBD will have mixed functions. There will be some residential areas, but it'll be dominated by commercial or light industries, etc. All right, and look at this one also. Tall buildings in the CBD. That's correct. If you look at our CBDs, We find the tallest buildings are found there. As we move out, we may get OBDs, outlying business districts, which has tall buildings, but generally the CBD has a lot of buildings. So can you see we can test on everything, learners? Once again, it's about taking your normal logic that you see in everyday life, and your learning of your content and combining it. Well, I hope the lesson went well and clarifies various issues. All the best. Stay safe